Well, let's get more now on those tariffs hitting China. Associate Professor Marina Zhang with the Australian-China Relations Institute at the University of Technology joins me live in the studio. Welcome to the program. Thanks very much for coming along.
Thank you for having me.
At first instance, what is your reaction to this news that we knew was coming, that's come into place in the last half an hour or so?
Well, we're moving towards deglobalization, and these sweeping tariffs are just destructive catalysts for that movement.
What is the end impact of that movement and these trade sanctions?
Well, I mean, from Trump 1.0 administration and Biden's administration, we have witnessed this deglobalization. But in the word of Ashby, and he wrote a book on this deglobalization, he described this movement as globalization. But we are witness acceleration since Trump 2.0. From my perspective, because I study innovation and technology, and I witnessed a transition from techno-nationalism now to economic nationalism. So a country's trade surplus against the US now is considered a national security threat. So therefore, Trump has used this ratio of trade surplus against your GDP as a percentage to punish the countries like China, Vietnam. And the impact could be really profound.
In terms of the impact, what are you expecting could happen here?
In Australia, on the surface, we probably see Australia can fill the gap left by the U.S. in terms of the, for example, agricultural products, which will be imposed with very high tariffs by Chinese. But on the other hand, we have to understand the complexities of global supply chain. And a lot of intermediate goods in the supply chains. And in the end, we cannot really say, well, this deglobalization process is a linear one. And it may have lateral damages to countries, including Australia. So we don't know what the impact will be.
So on one hand, there might be somewhat of a silver lining that there are either new markets or different supply chains that Australia can tap into. But it sounds like on the other hand, there are so many variables that it's impossible to pin down what exactly that looks like going forward. Exactly. The markets don't like uncertainty and instability, which is why we're seeing a huge impact across Australian markets and globally. Where do you see that all landing or taking us towards?
That's a very good question. Indeed, what Trump has done is tearing apart their rules-based global trading system by WTO. So now Trump's unilateralism movement, or we call it economic nationalism, is putting U.S. benefits against the interests ahead of every other countries. So what does that mean? Well, that probably will cause a reconstruction or realignment of supply chain in the world, including Australia. Australia is obviously providing a much upstream raw material, commodities, energy to the entire global supply chain. So with this reshuffling of the supply chain, including countries, especially in East Asian countries, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, and we really don't know where the market will going to next. And I totally agree with you. This sends a very negative signal. So the confidence of the investors and the consumers will be really hit hard. So we will see perhaps, if not freezing the economic activities, at least people will slow down and people will wait for what the signals next before they make any move.
And it's also driving some investors and some nations to look at other commodities. Gold has been one of those, for instance. There are some countries, such as Australia, that decided not to put reciprocal tariffs back onto the United States, and there are a whole lot of other countries as well. China, though, was one of the higher tariffed countries. They decided that they were going to match those at that original 54%. What do you think drove that decision?
That's a very hard question to answer, because the U.S.-China relationships can be multi-layered. Trade disputes is perhaps just the disputes or conflicts on the surface, but deep down, we're looking at China's rise is really challenging U.S. Hegemonic position in the world. So therefore, there is an element of great power competition, initially in technology, in supply chain, now in trade. So, and beyond that, if we look at, well, the competition between the two great powers can extend to, well, who is more influential in global orders in the future? And this is really quite nasty, because we're looking at the free world leader is turning into, well, I just cannot describe what he's becoming. But China's taking this opportunity to strengthening its political capital. But it's not an easy job, because China is also facing enormous domestic challenges. And we also need to consider that U.S. as a democratic country, its political system has very strong self-correction mechanism. But China, it takes much longer. So I don't know. I mean, it's definitely imposing a lot of challenges for countries like Australia, because everybody will benefit in a peaceful time, which I agree China has benefited greatly in the past 40 years. I mean, despite open up policies, economic reforms, but fundamentally, China benefited greatly because we lived in the past 40 years in a peaceful time. At least China was not involved in any war. But what if this trade disputes escalates into either Cold War or hot war? I mean, I just cannot imagine we will have everything we have taken for granted stand still.
There's so much at stake right now. And look, just finally, it feels, and not to simplify this entire situation, but what we're looking at is two countries and two presidents who are facing off. We are waiting to see what China's reaction will be, whether in fact they will raise tariffs again to meet this new threshold of 104%, or whether they will stand by as they are. Where do you see this going if, in fact, both of the countries keep on raising tariffs? Can they just do that indefinitely?
I like the word face-off, obviously. They are really at that stage. It's like two boys, they're sort of fighting against one another, and they both take their faith so seriously. So we don't know. I mean, who will back off a little bit? And obviously, Trump is looking for everybody just to kowtow to him and begging for negotiations. But China is very strong while they're fighting to the end. So this kind of mentality is really dangerous. And we wait and see what other opportunities will open for negotiation.
Yeah, very interesting times ahead. Associate Professor Marina Zhang with the Australian-China Relations Institute at the University of Technology. Thank you so much for your company and your insights. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.